When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come and see." So I looked, and behold, a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." So now the third seal is being opened, and a black horse comes out. And it says the person riding on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And a voice was saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine." So what does this mean? What is a representation of this black horse? By what it's describing, we can see that it's describing a spirit of famine, and this is going to affect the entire world. So when it says it has scales in its hands, scales in those times were used for money and the economy. This is how they were able to buy and sell in ancient times. Since they didn't have paper money like we have now, they would use gold coins or silver coins, metal that had value, and it wasn't an exact number, so it went by weight. This is why in England they still have that old terminology for money, where they have, instead of United States we have dollars, in England they have pounds. So if you wanted to buy something in ancient times, they would say this cost so many pounds, and then you will have your gold coin, or you'll have something of value, whatever the monetary value was at the time. They would weigh it to see if it matched how much the item was worth. So scales equal money and economy. What it's saying is that food is very scarce now. So it's saying a quart of wheat for a denarius. A denarius in those days equaled a day's pay. It was their entire paycheck for the day, and that would equal to 1 denarius. So because scales equal the economy, and if a quart of wheat costs a day's pay, it's saying that this is a time of economic hardship, where inflation has created a situation where even a small quart of food, a small quart of wheat, or a small bundle of food costs a day's wage. So you'll have a lot of people that are starving because they can't afford the food, because the food costs too much. So a lot of people will just go hungry. And so this causes and creates a famine where people can die of starvation. Now, this spirit has been revealed already. If we look at the world economies, we can see that in the past, during the Great Depression, there were food lines, and a lot of people were starving because nobody could afford anything. Nobody could afford the food. So we see that this spirit of famine and economic hardship has already been revealed in the earth. The most famous examples are the Great Depression in the United States, the very high inflation in Germany before World War II, the high inflation in Russia after the Berlin Wall fell. These types of situations where food costs too much for people to actually buy has happened in the past, and now it's continuing to happen on a global scale, because now the world's economy is all tied together. So when one country falls, it affects other countries. If one country has economic depression, it affects other countries that are intertwined with their monetary system. So the spirit has been revealed in the past and is now growing stronger. Instead of individual countries, it'll start affecting the entire world altogether. But it says that do not harm the oil and the wine. What does this mean? So the oil represents Israel. We see in Romans 11, verse 17, it says, "If some of the branches have been broken off, and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive root, do not consider yourself to be superior to those other branches. If you do, consider this, you do not support the root, but the root supports you." So what it's saying is that God made a covenant with Israel, and the ones that didn't have faith in God, God cut off those branches because God is the root of the tree, and in this case he's using an olive tree to represent his covenant with Israel. Now, when it says the wine also represents Jesus. If you remember in the Last Supper, Jesus took a cup of grape juice, but in those times they called it wine, and he said, "Drink this, this is my blood, and do it in remembrance of me." So the wine represents Christians, our relationship with Jesus, that his blood cleansed us of all of our sins, and Jesus' death on the cross forgives us of all of our sins. So basically, when it says, "Do not harm the oil and the wine," it's saying that the Jews and the Christians are not going to be affected by this economic hardship or this famine. God will sustain us and protect us through these economic hard times. So the black horse is the spirit of economic hardship which leads to famine.